Thank you for joining us today. I am delighted to see so many of you who are interested in the Master of Global Affairs. My name is Becca Méndez. I am the Associate Director of the Master of Global Affairs. I'm also an alum of the program. I have my Master's in International Peace Studies, and my previous work is based in Colombia as a Peace Corps volunteer and in Paraguay as a researcher. Right now, I'm sitting at the table where I meet one-on-one with students in my office, so welcome to my space. Today, I'm going to spend about 15 to 20 minutes giving an overview of the Master of Global Affairs program. While I'm speaking, feel free to send questions through the Q&A feature, and we'll spend some time discussing your questions at the end. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see a bit about the program. The Master of Global Affairs is a 2-year professional graduate program, and we're looking for change makers who want to scale up their ability to make an impact on peace, justice, and development issues. The Master of Global Affairs cohort is always very internationally diverse. Students in our program come from more than 50 countries, which are listed here. We deeply value the perspectives from many different cultures and backgrounds. In fact, many students say that one of the most enriching parts of the program is the ability to learn alongside their classmates from all over the world. The Master of Global Affairs offers many different paths to create an educational experience that suits your specific interests and career path. So at the point of applying to the program, you will choose one of the concentration areas in which to specialize, either sustainable development, peace studies, or more generally, the global affairs concentration. Regardless of your concentration choice, in your first year, all students take foundational courses to prepare for work in peace, justice, and development. We'll talk more in a minute about the experiential learning through a field experience, which is a really important component of our curricular arc. But for now, what I want to emphasize is that in all concentrations, students have the opportunity to develop depth of specialization in a region or topic of their choice. For example, you might pursue coursework or a field experience focusing on any of these topics listed here. Our philosophy is that the journey of each student is very unique. And so students in this program determine their path in close consultation with advisors and faculty. Because it's such a small cohort, students in our program receive a lot of personalized mentoring from a very impressive array of faculty. In the Master of Global Affairs, we place a lot of emphasis on gaining hands-on experience. MGA students work alongside multinational and grassroots organizations, international research and policy centers, government agencies, and NGOs. There are essentially 2 practicum field experience models in the program. As a general rule, students participate in one or the other based on their concentration. So sustainable development and global affairs students participate in a year-long partnership with the Global Affairs Organization through the Integration Lab, or the Ilab. This includes 2 months in the field between academic years. Peace studies students do fieldwork through a 6-month international internship. But really, both approaches to fieldwork have a lot of commonalities. They place an emphasis on learning through experience, bridging knowledge and practice, and both approaches are designed to train you to approach global problems with complexity. If you're interested in examples of fieldwork opportunities for students, I'd welcome you to take a look at the Keough Insider blog to learn more about how students have adapted their international field experience in this time when international travel hasn't been possible. In a recent blog post, a couple of our students share their story of working with the organization Catholic Relief Services. On their project, they gathered data on how refugees and internally displaced persons perceive and create home. And this project was aimed at better informing CRS programming on their resettlement programs. The students also share how they pivoted the experience to fully virtual due to the COVID restrictions on travel. In the picture on the right in this slide, you can see Peace Studies student Nate Van Duzer, who did an internship with the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And in fact, you can see him holding the Nobel Peace Prize medal in the picture. I also want to highlight some of our faculty who share their depth of global affairs experience with our students. Often, students come into the program having backgrounds in working at the grassroots or the community level. And throughout the program, we work with you to build the skills you'll need to scale up the level at which you can make an impact. We believe that regardless of the level at which you're going to work after this graduate program, you'll need to be able to understand how to engage with and impact policy. So one way we create opportunities for our students to gain these skills is interacting and learning from leaders and change makers in the policy world through classwork, classwork with world-class faculty, and opportunities through our office in Washington, D.C. So as you consider applying to our program, I would encourage you to take a look at our website and familiarize yourself with the breadth of faculty expertise and the many opportunities through 9 institutes and centers at the Keough School. I also want to mention that one of the things that makes the Keough School of Global Affairs unique is the emphasis on keeping human dignity at the center of all of our change-making initiatives. Let's talk about what you can do after receiving this master's degree. A Master of Global Affairs degree is very versatile. Upon graduating from the MGA program, students go on to pursue careers as change makers in many different contexts. Recent grads have been employed in organizations such as the UN Foundation, Food for Peace, Oxfam, the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and some have gone to work in the ministries of their home governments. Throughout the 2 years, we provide personalized career support to help you discern your strengths, develop professional skills, and connect with employers. This primarily happens through a series of participatory workshops each semester that are called the Career Colloquium. And in these workshops, you'll have an opportunity to discern your career path and sharpen your own tools for getting a job after graduation. So if you're interested in a career promoting justice, building peace, and advancing sustainable development, I hope you'll plan to apply. Our application for the coming fall semester is due on December 15th. On this slide, you see a list of the required components of an application. We provide generous funding to admitted students based on their merit. So in other words, a separate financial aid application is not required to apply for a scholarship. The most competitive applicants to our program have a strong academic background, ideally 2 years of professional experience in a global setting, proficiency in English and a second language, as well as strong letters of recommendation. So to wrap up, in the Master of Global Affairs, you'll have opportunities to gain practical hands-on experience through fieldwork, to learn alongside classmates from all over the world, and have the support of some incredible mentors as you discern your career path. The Keough School is looking for a diverse group of change makers to join us. So I hope that you'll all plan to apply to the program by December 15th. Here's some contact information for our office in case you have follow-up questions about the program or the application process in the coming weeks. So at this point, we're going to turn to the questions that you submitted prior to the event and in the Q&A feature. And I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Ty Lavers, who's going to help us facilitate the questions.
Hey everyone, like Becca said, my name is Ty Lavers. I also work at the Keough School, and I've been following along with your questions through the Q&A here on the webinar while Becca was talking. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get through all of these. We have a lot of activity going on, which is great, a lot of questions. And I know some of you also submitted some questions in advance. So I'll start with a pretty common one, Becca, that we are hearing from applicants. And the question is about testing requirements. And the first one is about the GRE. Is the GRE required for admission to the program?
Thanks, Ty. No, we are not requiring the GRE for admission in this application cycle. I also want to say, Ty, our admissions committee looks at applicants holistically. And if any of you are applying and you've already taken the GRE, you're allowed to upload it, and the admissions committee will consider that as one additional data point in your application, but it's not required.
Okay, great. Also related to requirements for the application, we have a lot of questions coming in about the English testing requirement, either the TOEFL exam or the IELTS. And so I think the first question is, when is that required? And then I'm also seeing some people providing a little bit more information about their own background with the English language. So if they studied in English before, do they still need to take the TOEFL exam? Or if in their country, English is a second language, do they still need to take the exam?
Okay, that's good. So we'll talk about English for a bit. If English is not your native language, you will need to signal to the admissions committee your proficiency in English. And this is due at the time that you apply on December 15th. And I'll go through your options. If you have studied at a university in which English is the mode of instruction, if you've studied there for 2 years, your transcripts from that university are enough to show your proficiency in English. Otherwise, you will need to submit either the IELTS score with a minimum of 7.0 or a TOEFL score of 80 with a speaking score of 23. So that would be the testing requirements for English that are due at the time of applying in December 15th. Did I get all of the questions, Di?
I think so. If there's still some more question about that from anyone who's here, feel free to submit it in the Q&A and we'll follow up again. Related to that, I think a lot of people are wondering what the characteristics are of a competitive applicant for the program. Like you mentioned, it's a pretty small cohort, so it's a fairly competitive program to be accepted. So what would you consider someone who's an ideal candidate? What would make them competitive?
Well, I'll start by saying that there's not one ideal cookie cutter candidate. We really like to see diversity of our candidates. So I can say general strokes, but I would emphasize that 2 years of experience in the global setting is important. Proficiency in 2 languages. And we really like to see evidence of a strong academic background, letters of recommendation, including one from a professor who can speak to your ability to succeed academically, and a really strong essay that shows both where you have been and what you would be hoping to do with the Master of Global Affairs. Ty, I noticed in the questions that were submitted ahead of time, someone asked about what we consider full-time experience, and if it's not full-time and paid, does that still count? And I want to emphasize again, we're looking at applicants holistically. And if you don't have full-time paid work experience, tell us about other experiences you have, maybe volunteering or an internship, anything that's related to the work of, the causes of peace and justice and development. So we definitely are willing to consider other types of experience beyond full-time professional.
Related to that, a tangential question here is, how much do you actually take into account those 2 years of professional experience?
It's a hard question to answer because the admissions process is very dynamic and we're trying to balance a lot of different factors and put together a cohort. The cohort feature of the MJ is really important. Bringing diverse perspectives from all over the world. So I would say we have seen that those who have prior experience before coming into the master's program, not only does it make the types of conversations that can happen in class much richer because you have experience against which you can balance the theoretical concepts you'll be learning. I also think that it helps position students better for launching a career into the global affairs field if they do have some beginner work before coming into the program. So for those who have no practical experience, I would encourage them to consider trying to get a little bit of experience before applying.
Okay, great. I think that just answered another question from a few people about and if they're an undergrad student currently, what would you recommend that they do? And it sounds like what you're recommending is go out and get a few years of experience and then come back and apply after you have that experience out of your undergraduate program.
Yeah, and let me add a little bit of nuance to that. I know that one of the questions that came in ahead of time was about like our age range and whether or not we have a minimum or maximum, which we don't. But I will say that largely the group of students that come into this program tend to be a little bit older than a lot of graduate programs because it is people who are coming in with a bit of life experience. But we have admitted people straight out of undergraduate before. So I don't think that you have to take that as a reason to not apply, especially if in parallel with your undergraduate studies or prior to your undergraduate studies, you have had some practical real world experience. So I would encourage you to, you'd be welcome to apply either way.
Great. I'm seeing a lot of questions actually coming through about the program itself, not just the application. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit. One of the questions I'm seeing is about the concentrations. So you mentioned that there are 3 concentration options available to students: sustainable development, international peace studies, and then the general global affairs concentration. Can you talk a little bit more about those different concentration options? What makes them distinct and how an applicant can go about considering which one is the right fit for them?
Yeah, that's a really important question because the decision about the concentration is something that a choice you make at the time of applying. And it does have a pretty big impact on what your study looks like while you're here. So I'm happy to, break them down a bit, but before I actually talk about the differences, I want to talk about kind of the similarities that unite the Master of Global Affairs, regardless of the concentration. So the character of the program is such that regardless of which specific path you choose as a concentration or specializing on a regional or topical area, you'll have a lot of opportunities to intersect with classmates who come from very different interdisciplinary backgrounds, different cultures, different parts of the world. And so though the concentration decision does have a big impact, I think there's uniting factors that will make it such that even if you choose sustainable development, for example, you can still pursue a graduate minor in peace studies. So in the presentation, I talked briefly about the three. We have international peace studies, sustainable development, and then the general global affairs concentration. So one of the biggest differences between the two is what is the field experience. So international peace studies students spend their first year preparing skills for being strategic peace builders and reflective practitioners, and working closely with faculty advisors to identify an internship where they can work for 6 months in their third semester. So peace studies students spend that entire third semester in the field, and then upon returning, write a capstone to bring together both the theories from the first year and the actual practice of the third semester into a final capstone piece. In the sustainable development and global affairs concentration, one of the keystone components is the field experience through the integration lab. And again, in the first year of coursework, students are introduced to the global partner organizations with whom they can work, and they get to form teams and work on team building skills. And they are assigned to, they will actually work with the management of the Ilab team to choose a project. And then over an entire year, these teams of students work with these global partner organizations to create a deliverable product for those organizations. One of the really, just to give an example, one of the really popular Ilab projects over the past couple of years has been working with an organization, an education organization in Chile called Enseña Chile. And so for students who want to specialize in global education policy, for example, that project might have a real appeal. So that's just broad strokes about like the practicum differences between the two. But if any of you are trying to discern between which concentration makes the most sense for you, I would really encourage you to look closely at the website, which lays out some of the curricular differences, like the classes that you would take as a student in one or the other concentration. And you can also see the profiles of the faculty members who would be advising you in the respective concentrations. And I think those are great ways to kind of get a sense of what the character of the different concentrations are.
Related to faculty, I have some people asking just to describe a little bit the mentorship that you mentioned earlier in the presentation. What does that look like with faculty members? And then also kind of related to that, we have several questions about the makeup of our faculty. How diverse are they? Do we have faculty teaching students from the Global South? And actually one of the questions is, does the Keough School do anything to decolonialize its curriculum? And so maybe we could address that collectively with you talking about our faculty makeup and the relationship and mentorship opportunities.
Okay. Good, those are like 3 questions in one. So on the topic of mentorship, it happens in a lot of different layers. There's staff who work specifically with the master's students, myself, and a team that work with MJ students, including my colleague, Mindy Fountain, who's the Associate Director for Professional Development. So she's helps specifically on the career development piece. And each student works with a faculty advisor for their concentration. So each semester meeting with them to determine their course selections. But what I see happening frequently is that because we have very small classes, students are often getting to know their professors quite well. And then oftentimes having conversations with them about how they got into the work of doing policy and practice. And then getting, having mentoring conversations in a more informal way with those professors. I know a lot of students, for example, connect a lot with our faculty member, Ray Offenheiser, who spent his career working at Oxfam and learning from his experience of how to get in and what kind of skills are these organizations looking for. On the point of mentorship, I also want to mention that a lot of our students are more and more finding research assistantships through Keough institutes that are, faculty or staff that are hiring students to work on research projects while they're here. And that's another great way to, dig your fingers in, get some experience, and also make a connection with somebody who's working on really important global issues. So I'll get to your other questions too.
Sorry to bake all that question into one. It's a big one.
It's great. No, and they're really important questions. And in fact, I like the tone of these questions because these are things that we care about so much. We are working to expand faculty to include more from the Global South. I think the best way to get a sense of this is to look at the faculty who are listed on the Keough page. And I think the best part of actually looking through the faculty profiles there is that you can see the types of research projects all over the world on which they're working. And I appreciate the question about decolonializing our curriculum. This is something that, frankly, students have been giving us great feedback about over the past years of our program, and we are working to adapt and change. And so just to name two, courses that are specifically dedicated to this question right now, Professor Justin De Leon is teaching a elective course called Decolonial Methodology to talk about how can global affairs professionals do their work in the field in a way that is not an imposition on communities, but actually in support of what the communities themselves want. And that's so that's a research methods course, which is preparing students for an approach to their global affairs work that is decolonial. And then Garrett Fitzgerald is a professor who's teaching peace building and decoloniality. So I think there are specific elective courses focusing on that, and then a broader across Keough effort to integrate a decolonial approach. I know that the faculty member who's teaching Foundations of Peace Studies this semester has actually invited the first year Peace Studies students to help in essentially rewriting the syllabus in such that to shift the focus away from like the canon to incorporate more voices from the Global South. So those are just some examples of where I've seen that happening, the decolonial approach happening in our program.
Great. While you were chatting, I also dropped in the chat box for all of the attendees a link to our faculty page that provides links to all of the bios for the various faculty members at the Keough School. And I'll also drop in the chat in a few minutes a link to a list of courses. A lot of people have been asking about opportunities and courses, and Becca, you mentioned several specific courses. So there's a pretty extensive list of available courses and electives. So we'll go ahead and share that in the chat in a few minutes here as well.
Thanks, Ty.
So we still have questions related to kind of the content and the substance of the curriculum. So I want to get through those, and then we're going to get back to some more specific questions that have come in about the application itself, things to consider, tips. There's a lot of questions about tuition and scholarship availability, so we'll get to that. But I want to first address some of these more substantive, curricular questions that people have. One of the attendees asked if there are language learning opportunities in the program.
Okay, so this isn't as simple of a question as I might want it to be. The answer is yes, there are lots of opportunities. And then let me talk about kind of what that actually looks like. So part of the reason why we like to recruit candidates who already have proficiency in 2 languages is because the MGA curriculum itself is You know, there's a lot that we pack into 2 years. And so those students frequently do language study on top of the MGA curriculum. It is often, I want people coming into our program to know that doing so is above and beyond what is the kind of the core of the curriculum. So there's a lot of different ways that students can pursue language learning opportunities. There's, you know, lots of language classes offered through arts and letters. The Center for the Study of Language and Cultures offers language tutoring, language tables, all kinds of resources, including language coursework in less commonly spoken languages, often taught by Fulbrights from all over the world. But in the first year of the program, the curriculum is pretty full with a lot of, you know, base core foundational courses and electives in Master of Global Affairs so that students can begin early in their 2-year trajectory to start to develop a specialization within global affairs. And so in the second year, there is a lot more space for electives. But what I've seen a lot of students do is pursuing immersive language travel or immersive language coursework, either in the breaks between the program or, you know, capped on at the end of their field experience, or students are pursuing a field experience in a place that speaks the language that they're trying to learn. So for those trying to learn Spanish, they might try to pursue an internship in Colombia. That's a popular approach. And so there's definitely opportunities and financial support to learn a language, but I want people coming in with the expectation and knowing that the pursuit of a foreign language happens kind of above and beyond the kind of the regular MGA curriculum, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It sounds like it's readily available. There's plenty of opportunities and actually funding opportunities to pursue language learning, but it sounds like it needs to be kind of the student's own initiative to pursue that as part of their course of study.
Right. Yeah, or making a plan with their faculty advisor from, you know, orientation when they're, you know, like kind of sketching out the 2 years. But yes, that's
Great.
a good summary.
Talk to us a little bit about the dual degree options. We have people on the line who are interested or are already enrolled in an MBA program or are interested in the dual degree, either MGA MBA, MGA JD. So can you talk a little bit about the dual degree options available to students?
Sure. Yeah, 3 things to say. So I'll start with the dual degree program with the business school. So both the Master of Global Affairs and the MBA are 2-year programs, but we worked out an option with the Mendoza College of Business such that a student could do both programs in 3 years. So for students who are looking at doing work in business and global affairs, this could be a really great opportunity. And the actual logistics is that to be in this dual degree program, a student needs to be separately admitted through both admissions processes. So they need to get admitted to the Keough School and to Mendoza to do the dual degree. And it can happen in a number of paths. A student could start our program and then apply to the MBA, or on the flip side, in their first year of the MBA, apply to and be admitted to our program. So with the law school, we have a joint MGA JD degree. And so the JD is a 3-year program. And with the 2-year MGA, you can do both programs in a total of 4 years. Again, you have to be admitted both to the law school and to Keough. And again, this can happen in either direction. So students can start their first year here and then apply to the law school, or vice versa. But the last thing that I want to say is that even for students who want exposure to law classes or business classes, the dual degree program is not the only option, because in the second year of the program, there's a lot of space for taking elective coursework. And the reality is the the doors of the university are open to graduate students in our program. So students take not only business and law classes, but they've taken engineering, biology, anthropology, sociology, political science courses across the university. So not only do we have a rich course offering here at Keough, but depending on where a student wants to specialize, or, taking a course from one of the other 6 colleges at Notre Dame could be an option for students as well.
I think while you're on the topic of diverse coursework opportunities while you're here on campus, it's worth addressing a question about the diverse cohort of students that come into the program. We have students or, interested students with a lot of different backgrounds, including civil engineering, education, ministry. And so there's a lot of questions about, am I a good fit for the Global Affairs program? What would you say to that, Becca?
Well, I would say that, we're really looking for a diverse class, and I can speak to the class this year. We have students with law background, STEM, private sector, public health, US military, Peace Corps. And so we have a pretty broad group. One of our students was on a pre-med path and then started doing development work in India, and then realized that he wanted to continue learning the skills to move forward in his career in the development sphere. And so he came to our program. So I would say we're very open and welcome to students from all types of backgrounds. And I think it would be great if you can explain in your application essay how your background is going to inform your work here in the Master of Global Affairs, and connect it with what you're hoping to do afterwards. Or if you're planning to make a total pivot, if you've been working in something and you want to make a total change, that's welcome too. So we would love to, the essay is a great place to kind of unpack the logic of that.
Is the essay also called the Statement of Purpose?
I believe so. There's, in the admissions application, there's like a shorter paragraph section where you talk about your identity and the logic of the concentration you choose. And then the larger essay, I believe, statement of intent, in which you're explaining, I think of it as your trajectory. So where have you come from? Where are you going? And why is the Master of Global Affairs the thing that will help you get there?
Great, thanks. That answers another question specifically about suggestions on what to include in those different essays.
Okay.
The field experience, that's such a big part of the program, whether you do the 6-month internship track through the Peace Studies concentration or the integration lab partnership with a global partner for 12 months and then a period of time in the field. How are students paired or assigned? I mean, how do they land where they go? I mean, and so questions have come in on both sides. For the integration lab, is there travel involved? How do you know what project you'll be working on? And then for the Peace Studies internship, what does that process look like for arriving at the internship that you actually do participate in?
I get this question a lot from prospective students because the field experience is not only really important to us as a program, I'm so important, in fact, that we provide funding so that students can do this without, the cost burden. But I know it's also really important to the students, and it's a draw to our program, but also it's a really critical thing that you are putting on your resume for future jobs as well. So I know the decision about where you conduct your Ilab experience, with which organization, or where you do your Peace Studies internship, that's a really important question. So I'll kind of unpack how that decision gets made, and then we'll talk about travel, because I know that's kind of a special question right now. So I'll start with the Ilab. I've talked about this as a 12-month experience with a global partner organization. And in the first semester of study here, MGA students will be in an Ilab class and working on some of the foundation skills that will prepare them for this global partner experience. And they get exposed, they get offered kind of a menu of project options. So global organizations will propose to the Ilab different projects on which they would like to have students support. So for example, Chemonics, which is an organization that does a lot of contract work with USAID, has proposed a lot of projects. And so students get a look at this menu of options and evaluate kind of like which types of organizations do I want to work with, which places in the world do I want to travel, and on what topics. So am I more drawn to working on a gender, an environment issue, an education issue, maybe a peace and conflict issue? And so after getting the menu of options, there's a really dynamic process by which the team that manages the Ilab work with the students to form teams. And so sometimes there's like a lot of lobbying as students try to, make a critical mass for the type of project that they want to work on. Often the students get their top choice, like either first or second choice. But by the end of their first semester, it's clear to the students, they're notified which team they're on and which project they're working on. So they know the student group they're working with and the global partner organization for whom they're working. And that starts the 12-year experience that then has the 2 months in the field and then the global, the deliverable to this organization, excuse me. Okay, so then for peace studies, I mentioned I'm an alum of this program, so I can, speak right from my heart of my own experience. I think in your first year, in parallel with your coursework and learning about strategic peace building and about reflective practice, students are having lots of one-on-one conversations with the faculty advisor to the Peace Studies concentration, Susan Saintville, and the assistant director, Jen Betts, and connecting with alumni from the Kroc Institute to identify peace building organizations throughout the world. And again, this is like a dynamic process that really depends a lot on the students' interests. Sometimes students tend to, there's like two approaches. One is trying to go deeper in a region of the world where they already have some experience, or trying a new place in the world and deepening their, topical knowledge. So maybe you have transitional justice experience in South Africa and want to go learn about transitional justice in the Colombian context. So that's part of the consideration and the conversation. And then students actually apply to internships to the organizations directly. And when they go into the field, they are working for the organization for 6 months. So that's real peace building experience on the ground. Just the last thing on travel. This summer, because of COVID, our students weren't actually able to travel internationally, but they still conducted internships with international organizations. So our program pivoted the experience so that it was fully remote for the safety of our students and so that they're not taking the virus to other parts of the world. But what we noticed is that global affairs, sustainable development, and peace building organizations all over the world were also pivoting to fully remote and virtual. So the students have missed out on the opportunity to travel. They have gotten some pretty real world skills that the people in the field are needing right now, of having to make that quick pivot to do fully virtual, cross-cultural, international teamwork virtually. So we don't know what the future will hold for the summer, but the incoming class for fall of 2021, so any applicants that are on this call would be looking to go to the field in, would it be summer of 2022? So we're hopeful that by that point, international travel will be more of an option.
Great, thank you. That was a really thorough explanation of how students kind of arrive at a relevant, meaningful field experience. I also dropped in the chat a link to the student blog, which you had mentioned earlier in the presentation. And we actually have a few blogs from students this year who talked about that virtual partnership with a global organization, like you mentioned. Here's a question just about the University of Notre Dame more generally.
Okay.
And so I'll just read this question. Given the Catholic character of the University of Notre Dame, how does the university's background permeate the MGA program? Or are secular views or other religions tolerated or integrated? And that could be an opportunity for you to just speak about life more generally at the University of Notre Dame and what it's like here.
Yeah, that's such an important question. Let me start by saying that I understand, I anticipate that from our incoming students, there's some trepidation about, being in the US right now, or maybe being and we, not only does the University of Notre Dame have a long history of supporting international students, but we really value that diversity, cultural diversity from different countries, religious diversity. And since the question was specifically about the Catholic character, I have a few things that I want to say. One is that, yes, the University of Notre Dame is a Catholic institution, and that does come out in the character of the university. One way is that it informs the core value at the Keough School of keeping human dignity at the center of the work we do. In this program, we have a normative commitment to peace and justice. And yet that invitation to delve deep into that concept of integral human development is also an opening to diverse religious perspectives. And we do have many students in our program from many diverse religious backgrounds, and we really value and look for that. And we want to bring in voices from other religious backgrounds because of the importance of having conversations across all types of fissures, and religion being one of them. So as for whether or not secular or other religious beliefs would be tolerated, I mean, we would celebrate them. So not just tolerate, but absolutely really want to see that. And let me just explain a few initiatives in which that is actually integrated into the intellectual culture of the academic program. One is through the Contending Modernities program, and the other is through the Ansari Institute for Global Religion. So the Contending Modernities, I welcome you to look into this a little bit more, but it's looking at understandings between secular, Catholic, and other religious traditions. And the Ansari Institute, they have fantastic programming of integration across religions. So thank you for that great question. And we very much hope to continue to bring in a very diverse class.
So I've been sharing some links as you're talking throughout this, and a lot of people are asking, can I get those links sent to me in an email? So I have them on record. So I did want to reassure everyone that following this recorded webinar, we will be sending an email with that video recording so you can watch this again. And then we'll also include some additional links, and we'll be sure to include some of these links that we've included in the chat throughout the program. I'm going to dig into, in our last 10 minutes here, some of the nitty-gritty questions about the application itself. So let's see.
Do you want to talk about the financial aid question? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Does it require a separate application? What does generous financial aid mean? Does it matter which concentration I apply to, whether or not I can be eligible for a scholarship?
That's a great question. So to be considered for financial aid to our program, all you need to do is apply by the December 15th deadline. There's no separate application for financial aid. The timeline for finding out what that financial aid is that we make admissions and financial aid offers together in mid-March. So around that time, as you as an applicant would both have clarity about whether you're admitted and how much financial aid is offered to you. And the amount can vary from a partial tuition to full tuition with a living stipend. But most all of our students receive very generous scholarships.
And just a direct question, with knowing that there are some full tuition scholarships available, are those full tuition scholarships available in all 3 concentrations?
Yes.
Great. There's another question about age. Does the program, is there an age limit to be considered? Does the program support students who are more mature, who have more work experience? So maybe talk about that aspect of the program.
Sure. Yeah, I think we've had great students on both ends. And so the answer is no, there's not an age limit. I think we've had people come to the program with 10 or 15 years of experience in the field. And it really enriches the discussions in class, the level of experience that older candidates bring.
Great. Another question about the application itself and a competitive applicant is the GPA. So what is the minimum GPA? And for applicants who studied in a country where they did not use GPA as the scale, what should they do?
Okay. The minimum GPA in the US on a 4.0 scale is a 3.0 GPA. And if you've studied in a place in which the GPA is not the system, we want to see you upload the transcripts from your undergraduate university or any universities where you've studied. Actually, the benefit of having a very global faculty is that we have people who are actually quite familiar with how universities work in Asia, in Africa, in different parts of the world. And so they can actually help our admissions committees interpret what it means to be second upper in a university from Ghana. And so if the transcript is not already in English, you'll need to get a translation to English for your application. But if it's not in a typical US calculation of GPA, that's fine.
Great, thank you. Remind everyone of the deadline and what is required on that deadline and what can be fulfilled following the deadline.
Well, so all of the components of the application are due on December 15th. If there's any piece of it which you're not able to submit by that date, you can contact us at keough-admissions@nd.edu. That's our email address for our admissions team. But we understand sometimes letters of recommendations, they'll need a couple extra days to come in, but we really encourage you to try and get all components of the application in by that deadline. You will submit an application to the graduate school, your resume, an essay, and then a shorter statement, 3 letters of recommendation. Again, I encourage you to get one of them from a former professor, transcripts, your proof of your English ability, if that's not your native language, and then an application fee. If you have any questions about this, I really encourage students to email us if there's any clarity that's needed about the specifics of that.
And there's a nice checklist on our website as well, keough.nd.edu/apply. And on that page, a lot of frequently asked questions and this complete checklist with some of those testing requirements are also included on that webpage. For the questions about scholarships, there are some follow-up questions about that. What is included in the full tuition scholarship? Does it provide a stipend or not? And then specifically, there's a question about the Coverdell Fellowship for Returned Peace Corps volunteers and how to go about applying for that.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of what is involved in the fellowship, the best thing that I can say is that come mid-March, when students get an admissions letter, it will make it very clear what the financial aid offering is and what that covers. So in some cases, it's a partial tuition scholarship. In other cases, it will be clear, to you in your admissions letter, the full tuition scholarship plus a living stipend to cover rent, books, food, and like a basic standard of living in South Bend, which has a very low cost of living. So students with that stipend do just fine. And the question of the Coverdale, I'm happy to hear there's some former Peace Corps volunteers on the call. Ty and I both are returned Peace Corps volunteers. And we get a lot of applicants to our program, so that's great. We would love to see your description of service uploaded as an additional document on your application. And that's what would qualify you to receive the Coverdell Fellowship. But I just want to clarify that we send our admissions offers in March. We actually wouldn't assign a Coverdell Fellowship until after everyone has confirmed their matriculation in April. So you might not actually know whether you are the Coverdell Fellow until a little bit later, but you'll know from the point in which we send your admissions letter what your financial aid package is, and then the Coverdell would not change that one way or the other. We have a commitment with Peace Corps that every year we'll admit and offer a full tuition award to at least one returned Peace Corps volunteer, and often we admit quite a few more than that.
Actually, what you just answered was another question about timelines. So for all of the applicants, the deadline is December 15th, and then they should expect to hear back in March. Is that March or April? Is that about right?
That's right. So mid-March is about when we give our admissions letters, and mid-April is the deadline for students to give their notification to us, and honestly graduate programs across the country. That's April 15th is generally the deadline to notify the graduate program of your choice to come or go elsewhere. So that's the timeline. However, oftentimes between when a student submits their application in December and when we make an offer, we have some correspondence with students, clarifying components of their application. Sometimes we do interviews. Sometimes we ask for a little bit extra information or explanation. So in between that time, as you're waiting, as we're going through, a very rigorous review process, you might hear from us, but you might not, and you're welcome to reach out to us with questions. But that's
Great.
kind of the timeline.
So I'm going to close with this last question. What distinguishes the Keough School from other professional graduate programs?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I hope it's become clear throughout this hour how much we value a highly international and culturally diverse student body. We also place a lot of emphasis on getting our students actual practical field experience. And at the core, we have this real normative commitment to peace building, justice, and advancing human flourishing. And so I'm so grateful that there's been so many, really thoughtful and, rich questions from all of you. I'm really excited to read the application materials of those of you who are on the call. I'll wrap up by saying again, we're very happy to connect with you and answer questions. So please feel free to reach out to us. if you need more clarity about the program or about the admissions process. And thank you for joining us today. We wish you all the best.
Thank you, Becca. There's a lot of people that have said thank you in the Q&A, that this was very informative and helpful. I do want to reassure everyone that we will have a recording available. We will email it to you to the email that you used to register for the information session. We'll also include some links that we included in the chat or that were mentioned throughout the discussion. I think it might be a good idea to just close out with that last slide you had, Becca, and it shows the link to the application page and the email that people should reach out to if they have further questions. We weren't able to get to everyone's questions today.
All right, there you go. Please feel welcome to send us your questions, and thank you again for joining us.